All right, welcome everyone to THRIVEcast. My name is DJ Eshelman. Glad to be with you once again today as your host, co-host, and all the most. I'm going to not get it rhymes today, but welcome to THRIVEcast, the show where we talk to experts in the field of IT and others, and maybe sometimes just ourselves, about life in IT and how to thrive instead of just survive. And as usual, let's bring on Jeff Pitch, my co-host with. Let's see, I need something that rhymes with most.
Yeah, ghostess with the no, I'm not a ghost.
Well,
I talk to myself
going.
all the time though, so that has nothing to do with this. But just letting you know, it's the way it goes, man.
Awesome stuff.
It is.
Stay tuned. Around the bottom of the hour, I'm gonna let people know why I'm so hyped up and crazy today and so high energy. I'm gonna reveal a newly found secret for making breakfast that is truly the breakfast of high energy champions.
Ooh. I'm excited. I can't wait to hear this.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So today on the show, joining us is Joe Shonk, and let's bring him on right now. Good. Yeah, there we go. Good morning, Joe.
Well, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're at.
Right.
Exactly.
So
I think today was the first time I gave like a reminder of what time it is GMT. It's like 3 p.m. GMT.
Well, the nice thing in Arizona is we just had the time change. Well, we don't change, right? So Arizona is one of those few states, or really the only state left, if not some part of Missouri or Kansas or whatever it is, that doesn't change time zone. So we just wake up and that's like, hey, we had 8 hours of sleep. It's 8 hours later.
Hey, the sun is still in the same place it should be. What do you know? Yeah, it must be nice.
Yeah, very nice. Well, at least, but hey, at least the rest of us aren't Indiana either, because they used to have like 5 or 6 different time zones, and I still think they've got 2 or 3,
something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, here in the Nashville area, where Nashville's pretty much the edge of Central Time. So you go just directly north, and you're in Eastern Time. It's kind of wacky. It's wacky wild.
Yeah, Michigan's about as far west as you can go and still be east.
Right. Yeah. Well, Tennessee's not quite long enough to cover 3 time zones, but
you should take over another state.
Yeah. I've been playing way too much Civ 5, and so you got me thinking, oh yeah.
Diplomacy, war, how are you gonna
make that a thing? Cool. Well, Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up and that sort of thing.
All right. So I was originally born in Ohio, Elyria, just right outside Cleveland, Ohio. So a lot of other people in the Citrix community have also come from Ohio. So it's kind of interesting, right, to say the least. But when I was about 5 years old, my parents moved to Phoenix and then to Salt Lake City, back to Ohio. And then by the time I was 7, we were back in Phoenix again. And I really didn't have much of a choice when I was 5, 6, and 7. So I was kind of coming along for the ride. So I've been in Phoenix for, I don't know if I want to age myself here, but a really long time now. And so since I was about 7 years old. So I grew up here in Phoenix. Excuse me for a second. So I grew up in Phoenix. Kind of got in IT really early. One day, my dad decided to bring home a TI 994A. I don't know if you guys remember any of those older computers. You guys are pretty young, right? So I had a TI 994A, and it had a little cartridge system in there, and you could play some video games and stuff on there. And then he also bought a book, right? And the book was like a thick manual on how to kind of program, right? And so you would just go through in there, and it had a bunch of little programs that you could
Yeah.
just type in and run it, and then you could play your game, right? Or whatever little game that it had on there. And then so you started taking that and you started thinking, hey, I could kind of make my own games. And so you take that and you learn how to write little programs and stuff. Of course, there were small little programs, stuff that you could throw away because as soon as you turn the thing off, you had no storage. At least I didn't have any storage to it attached to it, so I couldn't save any of the stuff that I typed in. So you would spend hours typing in code only to keep it on overnight, and then your mom would turn it off in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a TRS-80 and a little tape drive, and finding that
we finally got a tape drive for it too, and the first game I had was Richard Petty Talladega was the game, and you literally spent an hour and a half watching it read one side of the tape, and then it would say, please turn tape over. And so you turn the tape over, and it would spend another hour and a half, and then you would play, Richard Petty Talladega racing game on the TI 994A back then. So that was a lot of fun. Then at some point, my dad brought home a Commodore 128, I think it was. Yeah, Commodore 128. Right, kind of skipped the 64, but most of the stuff everything you did was in the 64 mode, right? So it's kind of the best of two worlds, and so you had you spent most of your time in Commodore 64, and there wasn't really a lot of anything really for the 128. There was kind of like a Unix type platform that you could plug in the floppy drive, and it would kind of like not like pre-early days of Linux, but it was kind of like a DOS-y version of it kind of predates DOS. I can't even remember the name of it off the top of my head, but so we played around with the Commodore 64. Actually had a little floppy drive now that could save stuff on there, but you had I don't know if you remember that the Commodore also had a magazine run called Run, and we get that every month. And it was literally, it didn't have like basic coding. It was just basically machine language.
Right.
And you were just typing in A4, B6, and then if you had the little editor, it would do a checksum. So basically you were entering 9 characters and for 8 characters, and that 9th character was a checksum to make sure that the previous 8. But if you were like me, you didn't have that, you were just typing it in manually. And when something went wrong, you spent the next hour trying to troubleshoot which character you transposed or which character you missed or didn't insert, and then try to rerun it and hope for the best. So my parents started bringing some of the technology home. And I think my dad originally intended to use it for himself, but never really did anything. So I kind of took over, right? And over time, I ended up getting, my dad brought home a 300 baud modem. I don't know if you guys remember that slow of a device back in the day where you could just plug it in and plug in your telephone, and it makes all kinds of weird noises, and you connect, and then you could talk to other people. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of cool. But I had saved up enough money that I convinced my parents to take the 300 baud modem back to Sears, where they got it. And I'm kind of aging myself.
Sears.
And we traded again with the extra money I had and got 120 baud modem. So 4 times
1200.
Yeah, 1200 baud modem.
Yep.
And so this comes at a time my parents didn't have a lot of money, but they did load on a few things, and that was one of them. And I, upped the money to get the 1200 baud modem. And so I kind of got into the online bulletin board system, right? I don't know if you remember any of those.
BBSs and yep.
And sometimes spend hours trying to get into your favorite bulletin board system because it would get a busy signal over and over and over. And then you finally get it in, you hear that crashing down, and you're like, yeah, it's negotiating. And then you're running to the keyboard to to log in and stuff like
Right.
that. That was the kind of the start of it, and the virtual world kind of opened up a lot of doors and avenues for me because I could actually talk to people, right? And back when I was a teenager, I was kind of isolated, didn't really have a lot of friends. I had a few in the neighborhood, but that was about it. Um, had some social issues, and as far as trying to make friends and keep friends and stuff like that. So having a world where you can talk to other people and they can talk back, and there's no, how do you put it? There's no reason for them not to talk to you, right?
Right.
They're there to talk on the messaging system. You're there to talk on the messaging system, and so that kind of became my life for a long time. Going to bulletin board systems and stuff. And at one time, I befriended one of the sysops, right? So they call them bulletin board operators, call themselves sysops. I befriended one of them that happened to live down the street, and he asked me to come over one day, and because he knew I was into programming and stuff, and we took his. He had a Commodore 64 128 setup. He had a hard drive. He had the RAM drive. He had everything, and it's like, oh, this is cool. I get to play with some equipment I don't have access to, right? And I get to take the bulletin board system. I forgot what it was called. Was it called Color 64? I believe. I don't remember. It was
Right.
but it was part of it was written in machine language, and part of it was written in BASIC. And so it's like, hey, we could take the BASIC part and we could start rewriting this stuff. And so this guy had a lot of grand ideas, but he didn't know how to program. So we took his code, and little by little, we started enhancing his bulletin board system to the point where other bulletin board system operators were starting to get jealous because they were seeing all these new features on his board, and they went on his board, and then they would go back to the guy who created Color 64 and ask them, hey, how is he getting these features? And even the Color 64 guy is trying to log in, trying to figure out, and you could see them because when back in those days, you could see what the person was doing when you logged into the screen. So we're sitting there watching people try to figure out how to implement some of these features we had in the messaging system. And so that became a lot of fun. Then we started taking it to the next level, and we started not only just adding mods inside of it, we rewrote the whole thing at the end of the day. So we took all the basic stuff and rewrote it. We took some of the machine language, because back in the day, I had still had the Commodore the Commodore 128, right? One thing you could do is, if you wanted to write machine language code, you could go in the 128 mode, go into debug, and you could start typing in all the opcodes, right? I didn't have the money for an assembler program to do this for me, so I couldn't do all the extrapolation. But I had the book, and in the back of the book, it had all the opcodes. And what I learned from that is I could just put in the machine codes, and I can do my jumps, I can do my register reads and register writes and all that fun stuff. And so in the 128 was a great dev tool in the sense that you could reset, go back in the 64 mode, and it didn't wipe the memory. So all you had to do was just scissor or poke into that memory address, test your code. If it froze, you go back into 128 mode, make your changes, go back, and you go back and forth without having to like save it to disk or read it from disk. And so that was that kind of got me into that programming. So when we get back to the Color 64 days, we started just, not only do we rewrite all the basic code, we started rewriting some of the machine language stuff. And one of the cool things that people couldn't figure out how to do was it was written for a Commodore 64, so it didn't run on the 128 platform. But what we learned we could do is we could tap into the speed of the processor. So when you're in Commodore 64 mode, you were like at 1 megahertz. And then when you were running in the 128 mode, the chip could run at 2 megahertz. So what we figured out is we could actually run a bulletin board system at 2 megahertz instead of 1. and it made things so much faster, almost twice as fast, which also made a lot of people jealous in that respect. Like, how is this guy running this stuff so much faster? So that kind of took me through part of high school, and I still on the side kind of developed my own little games and stuff for the Commodore. And at some point, the guy came to me and he said, "Hey, you want to trade your 128? I've got an IBM 286, right?" And it was a fair trade at the time, so I ended up trading him my Commodore 128 system for the IBM, right, 286, and whatever the CGA, whatever the format was, a 4-color screen. And it was a whole new learning challenge, a whole new experience for me, and that's kind of, I guess, part of what I thrived on, was just learning new stuff, right? And once you've learned something, you kind of get bored and then move on to the next piece.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have ever had that challenge, but that's kind of me. It's like you strive for the new stuff and you learn it. You get to the point where you can kind of master that technology, and then you move on to the next piece. I did some help. I helped out in my high school at the time. They got a bunch of IBM 386s or 486s. I don't remember what generation they were, but they didn't know what to do with them. They had no IT staff. They had nobody, and so I helped set them up and create a little network for them. And that kind of, I always kind of knew at that point I was going to get into IT, but where in IT? And at first I thought it'd be programming. I'd get in some gaming business and start programming for a gaming company. But that took me into college. So at that point, I went to community college for a couple of years. I ended up graduating. I went to DeVry University, and then graduated from there. And they're very, programming heavy program at the time, right? Mostly in COBOL. The one thing I knew I didn't want to do was go into mainframe stuff.
You could make a lot of money right now if you still knew that.
Yeah, I had to learn COBOL, JCL, DB2, all that kind of fun stuff. And I knew I didn't want to do any of that. But that didn't mean I didn't want to do any programming.
Right.
But for me as a child, I focused so much on the technology. I never really understood the business side of it, the other side of the coin. And that was something I struggled with a long time early on in my career, trying to figure out the business, the value to the business, what the business is trying to achieve, and why they do what they do sometimes. And from a technology perspective, you don't understand that, right? You're like, this technology looks great and it's perfect, do this, but from a value perspective, from a business side, it may not make sense. So it took a long time to come to terms with some of that stuff, right? So I never did get into programming, simply because the business side of the house isn't what I thought it was, right? You have people who are analysts and they write maybe some pseudocode. They get to be the brains of the operations, right? Whereas at that time, people who actually did the coding were the coding monkeys. They didn't get to solve the problem, for the lack of a better way of saying it. And then that's kind of the thing that's driving me, is solving the problem, coming up with the solution, and then, writing it out and proving it out. But so that didn't appeal to me. So that's kind of one of the reasons I didn't get into programming as a profession, is that the way corporate America had that set up didn't appeal to me, right?
Right.
And that's not to say that everybody's doing that. It's kind of come back around where you see a lot of really good programmers today that are the brains and the thinkers of the operation, and they do a bulk of the coding themselves. But back in those days, it was separate processes, right? And so that kind of led me into, I went to DeVry. I had a hard time getting any kind of job in IT. And I don't know if it's because of the hearing issues or because I was young, but a lot of time people just say, you don't have the experience. You don't, the catch-22, the paradox that how do you get a job when you don't have experience? How do you get experience if you don't have a job?
Right.
And so, I ended up getting some like internship. They were paid, but like a job board, and I found a local company here that did market research, and I went and worked for them for about a year, kind of doing some programming. You basically taking data in, massaging it for a particular type of format that the application wants. Then you run that the call center would run through that data. Once they get the data back from the people that they called, then you have to massage the data again and ship it back up. So you start understanding how business use some of that technology, right? Also, in college, you kind of learn a little bit of that as well. But here you start getting a little more experience. So by the time I was done with college, I knew I didn't want to do mainframes and COBOL and stuff like that. And so I started going down the PC route, right? Well, what was in the PC route those days? It was basically NetWare, right? Novell and Microsoft, right? Those were the two big hitters right there, with Novell being the bigger hitter of the two at the time. Right. And Microsoft was just kind of now coming up. So I started learning some of those technologies, partially because one of my teachers had suggested it. And so I went out and I took a Novell CNA class.
CNA.
Sounds all right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I think it's CNA or.
It was like for what, Novell 3.1 or 3.11 back in those days. And so I did that and got certified for that. And to even go further, I knew Microsoft was kind of up and coming. And a lot of places were starting to use more Microsoft. So the networking side was still Novell, but the server side was becoming more and more with the Microsoft platform. So I went out and I got a ton of books and started reading them and started going down a certification process. And then at some point, while I was still at the VRI, I went back to the job board and I found something for a consulting company in Scottsdale. And I applied and interviewed with them, and they were happy that I had some knowledge about both Novell and Microsoft. They were a Novell shop at the time, and they were a consulting company for putting Novell. And then they were also a big Lantastic reseller as well. I don't know if you remember the co.
I remember it very well.
Memories.
Fantastic. So they gave me a test, and apparently I aced it, and they hired me quite quickly after that. And they said, "Hey, here's what we want to do. If you want to get your Microsoft certification, we'll pay for the test, we'll pay for the books, not the training classes themselves, and we'll give you your pay grade will be reflective of what certifications you get." So next thing you know, I'm at Barnes and Noble buying a bunch of books and going through, flipping through and reading them. And I think I got my MCSC in 4 weeks. I went through 6 tests and 6 different books. And I'm like, okay, done. And that actually turned out really well because some of our customers, one of our larger customers, I won't say who they were at the time, they were an IBM OS2. And I had some experience with OS2. I had the 40-some disks that you put in a floppy, and that was one of the things I did with the IBM, after I upgraded over time, like the 286 to a 486 DX. It was an AMD, actually, so it didn't have the floating point processor thing. But anyways, so I experimented a little bit with OS2. So they were an OS2 shop. So they sent me into this customer to help troubleshoot and support their OS2 environment. And then they figured out, hey, this guy knows Windows NT. And so they kept me on longer and tried to make me the head of the Windows NT team. I'm like, I'm a consultant and I'm your team leader for your Windows team. That was kind of fascinating. And so that went on. After about 5 years, the company had some financial issues and started laying people off. And I was unfortunately the highest paid employee at the time. And it's like, well, you make too much. Goodbye. It's like, okay. If that's the way you feel, I'm also the highest billable person too. So, I I'm the guy that come to with the first 6 guys who couldn't get the job done. I get the job done for them. And so, that was the value I brought, is I got stuff done. And I was able to figure and troubleshoot things that other people couldn't figure out. So I'd go in and fix it. And so that lasted all, but once I got laid off, that lasted about a week until I don't know what it was. I'm trying to figure out how I got into it, but I found a job opening in Phoenix for a Platinum Citrix partner, and I thought I applied for it. And at the time, they weren't necessarily looking for a Citrix guy; they were looking for somebody who could help them on the Microsoft side, who had some Microsoft knowledge, because not everything. Citrix is a part of it, a big part of their business, but they also did firewalls, they also did Windows operating systems and stuff like that. So, and they did a little bit of Novell. And so I came in, I did the interview, I took the test, and apparently I aced that test, except I missed one. And then I said, well, which one did I miss? And then I explained to him why they were wrong. So apparently I got a job offer after that.
I've been down that road too.
And it was a really great experience, and it's a really fun time. It was 2.5 years, I think, I worked for them until they had to close the Phoenix office due to financial reasons as well. And I did a little bit of work with them after, going out to California. But at that point, I tried to become independent again and trying to just do my own thing and take some of the customers that I knew had issues with these other consulting companies and to go in there and start doing some work. But at this time, we're still in the middle of a kind of, I don't know, a bad recession, right? The downturn in the economy back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of projects lined up. And I did a little bit of work with Steve Greenberg. I did some work with InSync. I did some work with some other companies. And so I got this idea of, I subcontract my services for other people, right? Let them go deal with the administrative stuff. Let them go deal with the sales piece. Because I'm not a sales guy. I don't know how to sell. If I had to go try to sell something today, I would do a really poor job at it. But I can fulfill the technical side of it. So if somebody wanted to sell my services, I'd be more than happy to come in and resolve that.
Yeah, actually, I love that, because that's something that a question I get every now and then is exactly that. Like going into consulting, and they're like, "Well, I'm not good at sales. I'm not good at
I mean, I guess I could be if I wanted to really put the effort into."
Right.
But I'm really happy with the relationships. I shouldn't say kind of, but really happy with the relationships I have now. And there's no reason to change it. Unless I'm forced to change it, then I'm forced to adapt. I got to go find new cheese.
And I find a lot of times people are so concerned about giving up, a portion of the billable rate and things like that. But I like what you said about relationships, because that's really, if you have relationships with people, you'll end up with more work overall. And so for any, independent consultants out there that are listening, your rates are not anywhere near as important as your relationships. And so Joe's a great example of this. It's been like well over 15 years that you've been doing that, right?
I've been doing consulting since 1996.
Okay, so
not all of it's Citrix. But almost 20 years of it has been almost purely Citrix related. Even that the 6 years before that, we started doing some Citrix stuff. Right, the WinFrame was out. I didn't touch it. I mean, I knew of it. I played with terminal services back in those days, and so I was kind of working on the terminal services side of it. And then we went to Network Interrupt, one of the trade shows, and Citrix had a booth there, and we kind of loved it and brought it back. We put it in our lab and started playing with it, and the sales team made a few sales with it, and so we started going down that route of MetaFrame 1.8 on top of the terminal services. So we get terminal services. And even back then, I'll admit, I knew terminal services and how it worked. I didn't know how to optimize it or tweak it or all the stuff that we know today about application compatibilities and two users button heads over a registry setting or a file setting or some stupid stuff like that. User density, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to your point on the billable rate piece of it, because there's two pieces of, if you're doing your own thing, you're either selling yourself, which means you're not making money billing, or you're doing the work, which means you're not selling.
Yep.
So even if you do it yourself, you're not going to be 100% billable all the time at your top rate. It's just impossible, right? You can't sell and work and fulfill and you can't sell when you're trying to fulfill. If you're a one-man shop, if you grow your business, then you'll find you're starting to split things out, and you're starting to split your hourly rate, because you got to pay a sales guy, or you got to pay an engineer to subcontract under you to fulfill the work. And then you got the administrative side of it, which nobody ever accounts for in billing and collecting and all that fun stuff that happens on the back end, all the taxes and all the quarterly reports and all that fun stuff. Yep. It takes time, and you're not getting paid for that. Nope. And so you pay other people to do it. It's either you do it, you take time away. Again, that's kind of starting to understand that value of your time and what you do best. It's like, well, what do you sit down and what do you want to do? What is it that you want to do in the industry? Do you want to be a sales guy? Okay, there are people who are really good at sales and they want to be the sales guy. They live and they thrive in that world, and there's nothing wrong with it. Exactly. Then you got engineers who want to just do the engineering stuff, right? You've got people who are task workers. They don't want to necessarily have to design. They don't want the responsibility of architecting and designing a system. They just want to do the work. And so you have different mentalities and different personalities in the industry. You just have to find which one you really like to do and try to put yourself in a position where you can thrive at that. I'm sorry, I don't mean that to be a pun. But
I like it.
Idea, right?
I like
is do what you want to do, right? And do what you want to do really well.
Yeah, exactly. I think I said earlier today that that YouTube channel Pittsburgh Dag, that is my spirit animal. I think maybe Joe Shonk is actually my spirit animal. I think because that's exactly what I've been saying for a while now, is that it's really super important to just be in your zone, like do what you do best, and everything will follow. And it's kind of like thinking in aggregate and instead of thinking in macro kind of things. It's like looking at the whole picture of your business and that sort of thing, and treating it as a business, not just as a task or something you do. It really is important. So that's really cool. So I'm going to give Joe a little bit of a break, and we're going to come right back. But I promised I promised a talk about my energy today, and it's artificially created in the geekiest way possible. And so we're going to talk about how to make, if I can put this up on the screen here, how to make energy drink pancakes. So here's what I did. I found out today, or a couple days ago, or whatever it was, that if you use soda water in your pancakes, they become really fluffy. It's kind of cool. It actually works. And so if you're using a pancake mix that calls for water, just substitute that for soda water, and you get fluffier pancakes. That's tip number one. What I found this morning was that if you use Mio energy, like the stuff you get at like the supermarket, like the Mio Energy, you can actually make your own energy drinks and not give certain other vendors like way too much money for doing the same exact thing, basically. And so what I did was I took some of that Mio Energy drink and put it into the soda water, and then put that in for my pancakes. And so I had fluffy, high octane energy drink pancakes. There you go, folks. There's your weird tip of the day.
What flavor of Mio did you use?
I used the It's called strawberry. Pineapple strawberry smash or something like that. It was fruity. I did find that syrup is probably not a good idea. So it's pretty sweet on its own, especially if you like amp up the level of bio in there. But you can kind of fine tune that to your taste. I'll probably I don't know if I'll try the green one. That might be a little weird, but the blue one would also be weird too. But one of these days I'm
See,
gonna.
I like the berry blast or whatever that blue one is.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah, as a pancake, I'm not so sure.
it was a bit weird, but it was nice and fluffy. So
Yeah.
there's that. So that's your weirdness for today. That's the that's the oddness. So you're welcome, planet Earth.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Joe, let's talk a little bit about let's talk about how the process of becoming a CTP and all that kind of came about.
Well, that's a, kind of an interesting story. So what the CTP program started back in the late 2000s, right? And so I was part of the Citrix kind of community for a while. I known Jeff online virtually for ages, going back when we were on the thin list together, right? But from a virtual perspective, he was one of the big guys on the thin list there with Rick Mack and Warren, which I guess you had on the show the other night.
Yep.
I love the guy. Rick Mack, Jeremy Saunders, and a bunch of other stuff. That's also how I met Steve Greenberg. He was on that thin list too, and I started working with him and when he had his second child, I think it was, and he needed some help fulfilling some stuff. So he called me up because he knew I was also in town, and he knew me from the thin list, and so that's how we started working. That's when I met him the first time, and kind of doing the subcontracting thing. So coming back to your question is, so we were part of this community for a long time, and I had an online presence and stuff, but apparently there was a bunch of Microsoft MVPs that had gone down to the Citrix office, and they I don't know who they talked to and who they were meeting with, but at some point that's kind of when Brad Nunn and company they started the CTP program, right? And they made all the Microsoft MVPs at the time of that, and so started following that. It's like, okay, the Citrix now has this community-based program around the starting to embrace it, because for the longest time Citrix was, in my opinion, wasn't very community focused, where they didn't take lightly to people saying things online in a certain way, or blogging things, or using their name in a negative way. So, but this was an effort. I think Brian Madden and Jeff and Ron and a bunch of other folks were able to convince Citrix, hey, you need an online presence. You need to embrace the community. These guys are here to help you. They're not here to hurt you. And so that CTP program was born at the time, and it's like, hey, okay, so how do I become a part of it? And I started going out and doing some of the blogging and stuff. I'd already been putting some my delete profile stuff out there. I had written a DOS-based framework for doing automated installations back then. Started presenting at Bryforum, and so I presented both the automation framework, some deep dive into some of the CLI commands, right? This is kind of pre-PowerShell days, and also the ability to clean up some of the profiles and how that worked, and those kind of things. So started getting into doing more public speaking, which is something I normally don't do, and I'm not very comfortable doing. And even now, kind of you get those butterflies in the stomach, and sometimes it was one year it actually made me sick, where I was starting to literally throw up, go to the bathroom and come back out, and and I don't want to get gross here, but it was getting to that point. But anyways,
Yeah.
There was a couple people who left the program. I won't say who, to go work for a competitive product, and that meant there was some openings, right? Jeff laughs.
We're both laughing because I love how tactfully you put that.
Well, there are some people who left, to go towards greener pastures. Nothing wrong with that. You got to do what you got to do, right? And if one community is not fulfilled, if one community doesn't help fulfill the needs of that individual, maybe they need to go to another community, find somebody that can help, where they can contribute and also get some benefit and value out of that community too. So those guys left, and a few more people stepped up and became part of that program. And so I started networking with like Doug Brown and a few of the other CTPs that were in the program, and made friends with Laura, who was the program manager at the time, and it started, building and networking in a sense, right? That's one of the biggest aspects there, networking and getting my name out there and getting some recognition. And that wasn't my initial goal. My initial goal wasn't to get the recognition. My initial goal was to try to be part of the community, and even at that time, selfishly, to be part of that CTP community. And the reason I wanted to be part of that CTP community because I wanted to be able to interface and talk with these product managers, the developers on the back end, and say, hey, there's a lot of problems here. How do we fix this? And there's some gaps here. How do we go and fix that? So I wanted to be part of a program that could help, define the product itself. And that was more so what my goal was. And so after a couple of years of petitioning, I got accepted in one of the batches that year. And then I've been part of that program ever since, and still providing feedback. A lot of stuff I'm doing right now is behind the scenes, trying to talk to a lot of the PMs and providing feedback of what's working and what doesn't work. And
yeah, when I look at your background, that makes a lot of sense that you would just fall naturally into that, because that's kind of what you grew up doing. So it makes a lot of sense to me that would be kind of your niche. Yeah.
And that's what I try to do, try to solve problems. Now, I'm not the one that created the problem. I'm not the one that can actually solve the problem, but I can at least learn how to find the right people who can do the problem. Because screaming, I don't know if some of you guys, Jeff probably knows really well. A lot of stuff I would scream on a blog or scream on Twitter, and a lot of people took offense to that. And and they didn't like. Here's the thing: people don't like it when you air out dirty laundry publicly. And so, that was kind of my so some of the social issues I've had back in the day. I mean, I think I've grown quite a bit over the last 20, 25 years of doing this stuff. But at the same time, it's like you when you don't have a lot of people, especially growing up with friends and stuff, some of the social aspects are going to be lagging behind. And so, when you start airing people dirty laundry, they don't take offense to it. Now, other people really liked it because you're calling out a company for stuff that they should have known that they should be doing, and they're not doing, right? And so, over time, I started building a network and started being able to get into the CTP program. I was able to get my grievances more towards the people who can make it happen, right? Yeah. Some guy reading off Twitter isn't going to be the Twitter handle isn't going to take my feedback and forward it on. I mean, they might, but you got so many voices nowadays. You're going to get your voice A is going to get drowned out, and B, you're talking and screaming at the wrong person, right? And so it's now trying to figure out, okay, I'm coming to that realization of, hey, how do I network with the right people to get some of these things uncovered and fixed? And so that's kind of how I kind of evolved into, which also meant a lot less blogging, because then I had no content. it's like you say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it all at all. Well, I've kind of come around to that part of the avenue too. And some people miss that, come out swinging type attitude, but sometimes you do get more flies with honey than manure, but I don't know. It seems to have worked out really well, and people seem to listen when you rephrase things in a certain way and present that information that you want to convey a certain way, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's always been the great thing, when you've come out, Joe, with even when you were, going on Twitter. I mean, you've only got 140 characters or whatever it was at the time to air a grievance, but you always came prepared, right? I mean, you had, okay, Citrix, you've got this huge problem here. You didn't just come and complain about the issue. You'd back it up with, the basically the facts and everything else, and maybe even some suggestions, but that was always you weren't just complaining to complain. You were complaining and backing it up with data, and bringing that to their attention, which is really, I mean, the right way to go. I mean, you can have, if you can have an abrasive personality at times, but if you back that up, you're going to get listened to probably more often than not. But you're right. If you're just publicly, going out and oh, your product's crap, man. You got to fix it. Yeah, that's not going to, it's not going to get anywhere. But yeah, once, and you're right, once you got into the CTP program, you start getting access to the behind the scenes stuff where you can deliver those messages in a more detailed way to get their attention, and for them to realize that, oh yeah, see, he's got all this data that's showing that, oh yeah, this is not working or not working correctly, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, the evidence-based stuff is. I always thought that was kind of important to, like, if you're going to make a grievance, at least back up your statement and point to an article or point to a setting or something that kind of drives home what the issue is. And
Yeah.
I think some of that came out due to the networking side of the house.
Oh, we just lose Joe.
Yeah,
No?
we lost your video, but I still hear you. So
Can you hear me, DJ?
Yeah.
I don't hear Joe.
Oh, that's very odd. Let's try that button right there. See if that brings him back. All
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Hey.
Oh, sorry about that. Maybe I hit the wrong button or something, or
Who knows? Yeah, it happens.
well, what I was saying about a lot of the stuff. So when you're consulting with Citrix, right, or any end user computing product, you touch everything. It
Yeah.
touches every aspect of the organization and every aspect of the IT, right? You have a ton of networking involved. You got virtualization involved. You've got storage you have to deal with. You've got identity management you have to deal with. You have processes and change control. You pretty much, if there's a technology in the data center, you're probably touching it in some fashion with an EUC solution, right? And so you when you go in and you set up your stuff and the thing isn't working and you have to go and troubleshoot as to why it doesn't work, it's like, we had this saying that we like to joke about. It's called the 99% rule, and what we mean by that is 99% of the time your problem is probably with the network team, and most of the time it was, right, and they didn't put your stuff on the correct VLANs, or they didn't tag in the right VLANs, or they got the wires crossed or something of the sort. And it's always it always feels like it's something to do with the networking team, whether it's an art cache issue, routing issue, blah blah blah. So you say, hey, we think this is a networking issue. You bring it to the network team, and they're like, scoff at you and they laugh and walk off the room. In a sense, I'm being a little exaggerated with that, but that's what it feels
I
like.
don't think you are.
Kind of what it's like for us
But
too.
it feels like that, right? And
Yeah,
so
it does.
in order to get the network team attention, you have to give detailed information of exactly what is wrong with their system, meaning, and to do this without having direct access to the switches and routers and whatnot, right? You have to show that the ARP cache or the ARP response isn't there, or that you can ping this gateway, but you can't ping this gateway. It's like, well, wait a minute, I'm on the wrong VLAN. You tell them what VLAN you think you're on versus the VLAN you're supposed to be on. And then they kind of like, okay, let me go take a look at it. But you had to gather all that data first before you could make the case. And that kind of became a habit in doing that, because it's hard to get people to move just based off of you say, hey.
And a lot of times, I think people make the mistake, especially in, well, here in the U.S., it's different than other places for sure. There's a lot of places out there that basically the response is, well, that's not my job to fix. Walk away. And I'm hearing something different from you, Joe. You're advocating, and I think correctly so, that it's like, no, we're all in this together. All these systems touch each other in some way. If we can help a solution, then ultimately we're all going to be better for it. And so, yeah, it's a shame that mentality still exists in IT, that, it's just, oh, not my thing, I'm going to walk away,
Yeah.
I have leadership issues, but every time I bring up leadership issues, I get shot down for one reason or another by leadership. I wonder why. But again, it's just, sometimes it's a lot of old school mentality there. And sometimes the leadership doesn't understand how their team works, or what each person in their team is capable of doing, or what they're good at doing. You have people that are cowboys, right? You try to minimize the cowboys and rein them in, but every IT organization doesn't need a whole team full of cowboys. Sometimes you need people on your team that are just task workers, right? And so being able to identify who is good at what bits and pieces and assigning them the correct job or tasks that kind of define what you think the role could be in the organization. And like I said, some people are just like, not my job. Well, what do you mean it's not my job? And that's still true today. I got one customer trying to figure out what to do with their NetScalers, right? The networking team doesn't want anything to do with them. They don't have a Citrix team. The infrastructure team doesn't know what to do with them. And so right now, I'm helping one of our companies that we brought in. We work with a company called Centra that does managed services. So they manage the devices in a sense, but they don't have anybody that they've assigned yet from the organizational side to own up to the NetScalers or the SDXs that they have. And I know I'm using old school NetScalers, but they refer to it as NetScalers because they have had them for a long time before the name change. And so, context is everything. So the Citrix ADCs that they have, they depend heavily on them for the remote access, and even all the internal access goes through those gateways. But trying to figure out who in the organization, from their perspective, it has ownership over the device. And right now, people are like, it's not my job. We don't know what to do with them. And so that's kind of been even a challenge today. And that's one of the ways it seems like it manifests into, right?
Yeah. It's interesting to bring that up, because I remember that very much with terminal services and MetaFrame coming up. Who owned the application? Is it the desktop team that, installed it normally? Is it the server team now? Because that's a server operating system. It's in the data center.
Right?
Yeah. Everybody just going, no, it's not mine. It's not mine. So, but someone's got to do it, so you step up, you start doing it. But yeah, it's hard that mentality still sticks around. I mean, as you're going through your story, like about networking, about 1,000 stories go through my head that it just brings back, like, you just sitting there going like, I remember one where it was, we literally had a NetWare server that was in our lab, which was like in our office. And this is going back to token ring. It was beaconing. So we went to the network team and said, hey, we think you got a problem with your network. We got the server beaconing over here. No, our network's fine. Why is it beaconing? It's not our problem. And it was like, it's that mentality. And it's not just, I don't mean to pick on networking, but I mean, come on.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine.
It's DNS. It's, it's
they brought that attitude on that criticism.
Yeah. Yep. And so, you get frustrated, and that's when people start going a little rogue, going, just getting, I got to get this done. I just, I'm going to just go do whatever. And that's where a lot of that frustration comes from. But I mean, I'm sure we've all been in those meetings where you've got networking, Active Directory, storage, server, virtualization, and literally everybody is pointing right back at you. It's a Citrix issue. It's not any of us. And so you're right. And that's why I love, the control ups, stratospheres, things like that, where you can delve into some of those portions a lot easier, and you can gather data to be able to hand over. It's not by hand anymore like it used to be, where we'd have to literally,
you have to prove that somebody else exists, right?
Yeah.
So after I started doing the consulting thing, around 2003, I basically ran out of money, and so I needed a job. And one of the guys that I had worked with helped me get into Perot systems, and I got a job working for Perot as a consultant outsourced firm for a hospital local here, and so I'm on the Citrix team for that particular hospital. But we also had a guy that they hired somebody just for our team to filter tickets, because every time the help desk got a ticket in, they would forward it to the Citrix team. Whether it was Citrix related or not, it was always a Citrix problem, right? And that's kind of the downside. Nobody else wanted to do it. You had to kind of prove that this is an application error, take the screenshots and all that stuff, bundle it back into the ticket and forward it to the team that should be taking care of that particular ticket. And even the network teams, the network team is even told, like, the help desk, don't send us tickets, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of politics involved too. Yep. And that's something I had to come to terms with, and I couldn't deal with early on in my career. All this and I'm not talking today's politics like government. I'm talking about
internal politics
inside. But I didn't realize there were teams that would fight over each other, or the business would make stupid decisions because of politics. We couldn't implement an SSO solution simply because the help desk said it would cause their first rate closure rate to drop below 97%. They wanted to keep those numbers high because, again, most of the calls had to do with password resets, and they didn't want to lose that to an SSO solution, which would have benefited the company greatly, right? And that's, to me, an example of politics and something it's hard for me to get my head wrapped around.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. And I've dealt with that exact issue, actually, so, and it's hard to know sometimes where to, or how to stick your head into that, especially as a consultant, and, learning how to approach kind of the C-suite and be able to speak their language to them and say, look, I'm advocating for you here. I'm not just trying to push my agenda, that sort of thing.
Even amongst other teams, trying to get them to work with you, not against you.
Especially the desktop team, right? Because the Citrix or any other product, the desktop team thinks it threatens their world, right? That they won't need as many people on their team to service it because it's all being done in the data center somewhere. And we actually had a meeting with one organization where we walked in, talked to it. It was a really great discussion with their Citrix guy and some of the business leaders there that would have some influence in the organization. Then we find out a couple days later, the Citrix guy made a presentation to all their uppers, and then he was walked out the door the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason he was walked out the door the next day was he was kind of selling Citrix as a way to reduce staff in the organization, and that ticked a lot of some of those senior staffs off basically, and he was let go because of that, because now the organization thinks that Citrix is a threat to their department, right? And which is not the case. The idea is to help elevate everything and help bring people up, get rid of the redundant crap that you do on a day-to-day basis, help you retrain, and instead of worrying about minute issues, now you start thinking about how can my time and resources be used to further enhance the solution for the organization, or work on new solutions for the organization, right? Instead of pandering to old solutions.
See, I told you, Joe Shonk is my spirit animal.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean that was always a big thing, when we were selling like Unidesk and stuff. It was never, this makes it so easy that you can get rid of staff. It was always, this makes it so easy so you can put those other staff members that have been doing this management day in and day out, all those projects you got backed up and, you've got in a backlog right now that are critical to the organization. You can start putting people on those and getting man hours to getting those done. You're freeing up resources to get real stuff done within your organization. It was very, I do remember, a few times that somebody would come back and like the customer would come and say, we can get rid of staff if we do this. And it's like, I don't want to be the one to say yes.
Yeah, or you can repurpose them and not have an HR nightmare. I mean, it's how you frame it.
Yeah, exactly. But there are always some companies. I mean, like Joe said, he was the highest paid consultant there, but he was also doing the most billable hours, bringing in the most money. There's that weirdness with companies.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's a mindset thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah. When companies don't do well, they do even more strange things, I guess, right? The behavior changes, and how they react changes in almost an eerie, weird way. Yeah. And we had somebody that worked with us for a while, and she was able to pick up on all the weirdness that goes on to an organization, almost like a conspiracy theory level stuff. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't notice that. I didn't notice that he reacted a certain way when you said this word, but she would pick up on it, and then she would tell us about that interaction later on. And then, because she did it a lot, I learned how to pick up on some of that body language stuff too, right? Like I said, being very social and adequate, interacting with people, learning body language and how people respond, and the words they actually say out of their mouths, and they say it in a certain way. Yep. You start to learn after a while.
So we are 5 past the hour at this point. I don't know if you have if you want to stick around with us and talk a little bit more. I just want to make sure we're okay to do that, Joe.
We're good. Okay. I booked 2 hours this morning.
Yeah, that's always the smart move, right? So yep. I actually wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit. I know that we kind of talked pre-show a little bit about kind of overcoming disabilities, especially ones that are, like what you're having. And maybe tell us a little bit about specifics about your disability, your hearing, and what that looks like, the background, and then kind of how you overcome that and that sort of thing. We'll start there.
All right. So for those that don't know, I am what they quote as profoundly deaf, which means I have severe hearing loss in both ears. So I do wear like bigger hearing aids on each ear here. If people ask about the in the ear, they're not powerful enough. So
Oh no,
Did we just get cut off?
we lost it again. Let me try this.
there we go. Is that better?
There we go.
There we go. So the in the canal, in the ear type hearing aid, they don't put out enough power or amplification to help, right? So so it's like to resort to the more powerful ones. At one time, these were like the most powerful hearing aids that you can acquire, right? They didn't make them any larger. I mean, the size is larger, but the amount of output, not so much. And so, kind of going back, so when I was 8 months old, I had gotten what the doctor said was spinal meningitis, which is, I guess, a bacterial infection around the brain membrane, right? And so I had a high fever of 106 degrees. Back in those days, antibiotics were used, but they weren't as well known as they are today. And so they would just use like a wide spectrum antibiotics and just throw the whole kitchen sink at it and in hopes to um, you know resolve the issue. Well, the problem with those antibiotics back in the day is they found out later that it can cause nerve damage in the cochlea. So that's kind of what my hearing suffers from, is the hairs in the inner cochlea got burnt out, and so I still have a few. Most of my hearing is in the lower range, so really, really high ranges, I won't be able to hear anything, and there's no amount of amplification that can make up for that. But I have enough hearing with the hearing instrument that I can function as a normal adult, or what some people would call normal, I guess. Normal is relative, right? But my parents didn't even know this until I was about 5 years old, that I had hearing issues, and so they were a little late to the game. It's like, hey, he's not talking, he's not interacting, he's not doing anything. So when I was 5, I got fitted basically for my first hearing aid, and at the time they thought my left was far too gone, so they didn't even put a hearing aid in there. And it wasn't until after high school that my audiologist thought it would be a good idea. You should have one on the left side. You may not be able to understand a lot, but at least you get a little bit of directionality, and it will help a little bit in comprehension. So, and it does, right? If I try to hear this out of this ear with a hearing aid and this one without anything, it still sounds kind of garbled and mumbled, but it does help with the overall hearing. So I don't need to amplify the right side as much, because the left side is providing some information to the brain, and then the brain can kind of just fill in the gaps of things that I don't necessarily pick up on. As far as being deaf in our industry, it's actually not as hard as you would think, because everything we do now, even today, is virtual. Even back then, when I was doing the bulletin board system, that was all virtual, right? That's kind of the beginning of the internet era, right? When you're doing bulletin board systems and the internet forums and stuff like that, you didn't talk to people, they didn't talk to you, they typed at you and you typed at them, for lack of a better way of saying it. But when I was doing consulting, it sometimes got to be really difficult talking to people. I've gotten better at it, and the more I know a person, the more I understand them. I don't know if that makes sense, but I understand the way they talk. My brain can put together. You start to understand whatever accent they have for that particular person, not in general, but for that person, the way they talk, how they talk, they a lot of times talk the same way. And so if I get some of the main words, the brain will put the sentence together and be 90% accurate, kind of like machine learning. in the head, but I don't know if I'm explaining this in that way, but there were times where I had to look over to the person next to me and say, "Can you give me the Cliff Notes?" Right, and so and they would repeat a few. They would say a few things, and then I understood what the other person said. And it's not to be mean, but people with really thick accents are really, really hard, especially when you don't know them and when you're not in front of them and you can't lip read, because I do depend a lot upon lip reading. Wearing a mask these days, it's really even harder, right? Because you're taking away a tool that I used to using to help with comprehension, right? So you look at body language, you look at context of the conversation, you look at the lips when they're speaking. If you know the person really well, it goes a super long ways, especially with an accent, and sometimes you get to know a person well enough that you don't have to say anything, right? And so I worked with like Steve Greenberg and Hal Lang before he went over to T-Mobile. They helped me out a lot too in that respect of interfacing with customers and trying to understand. It was a little bit difficult when Hal left in that respect, that he was kind of the guy that was with me on a lot of these projects that I could turn to, and he could give me the quick 3 words that I needed to know to understand the conversation to the point that was being made. And that's that. Now we live in a virtual world. And so kind of going back to the screencast, and like you and Jeff have, I understand exactly. You guys come to me really clearly, right? And so I don't have it. And we've talked before, so the brain kind of gotten used to how you guys talk and how we interact, and so it's not a challenge anymore, right? One thing I will say is these hearing aids I got about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer. They have Bluetooth in them, and that's like the greatest invention ever. Because now I can use my phone and I can talk to people Bluetooth straight to the hearing aid, and it sounds like their voice is right inside my head, and it's the best thing ever.
Awesome.
At least in my perspective, right? It's like
do you know that those voices aren't in your head, though? I mean, maybe it's not the phone. Maybe.
Well, I have other voices that we won't talk about them. But they usually like ignore me and want to go home at the end of the day.
So I would love for you to tell my wife that I'm coming through clear and you can understand me. That I think she might need that to hear.
Hearing aids too, but get them with Bluetooth. It's like the best thing ever. Because I had a challenge. I was at a friend's house and we were trying to learn how to play a board game. So we were watching a YouTube video on the TV, and I was having a little bit of hard time with that. And so I said, "Screw this! Let me try it on my phone." And then I picked up everything he said when it came through on the phone right into the head. So I don't expect a lot of people to really understand that, but those are some of the challenges I've had to overcome.
Yeah, I've had hearing loss. Not nearly to the extent that you have, but I the thick accent thing, I have problems with that. And you're right. When you've nailed it. The more you know somebody, the more you hear their voice, listen to them, their cadence and things like that. It does make it easier.
Yeah. You don't struggle as much. And I struggle with this, and I always will, just because that's mine. And there have been a few times, and I've been very fortunate. I've worked with some really great people over the years that understood me, not my hearing, in a sense, right? And they see somebody's hearing loss, they don't talk to me really slowly because I can't hear, or really loudly because people tend not to do that. And there's been a few times that I've been asked not to be on a project because they had some preconceptions of that. But those are like super, super rare. And I've been very fortunate I haven't had to really encounter or deal with those for the most part, right? And that's not to say you got to remember, just because somebody has a physical one doesn't mean that other people aren't struggling or have their own little problems or issues, and you realize, hey, maybe I'm not alone, right?
Yeah.
Um, other people have medical issues, right? Or something you might not be able to see. They may have a heart condition. They may have depression, anxiety, like we were talking about earlier, and you don't necessarily see that, right? Especially somebody who's bipolar, right? They put up a front, and they're as happy as can be when they're in front of you, but when they're not in front of you, they're a completely different person, right? And so we all have to remember to try to treat each other uh, in kindness in that way, right? So we don't know what other people's stories are.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. It's funny. And for me, I know that I was on a flight to as well. It was a flight to Milwaukee actually, and had a really bad like head congestion and things like that. And so I got some bad advice not to like clear my ears or whatever. And so these little those little drops you put in your ear to supposedly like
Oh, cleans out the earwax.
yeah. So this one was like alcohol based, and it did some permanent. So I have tinnitus in this ear. So I have constant, like just a it's a weird like wall of mid to high frequency noise, and it's yeah, had some ill effects. For me, it's being in large groups of people. I mean, I never had a problem with that before. I always kind of thrived in that kind of environment. But now, if it's just a large, echoey kind of room, it will actually cause me anxiety, and I kind of shut down. It's
Yeah.
kind of to the degree where I'm like actually even in this room here, you can see I have sound treatments and things like that, trying to deal with echo, because that for me is something that is a detrimental thing. But like you said, going virtual has been really kind of good in a lot of ways. Because you can kind of use technology to work around these kind of issues. It's kind of cool. But we definitely have to be aware of the unseen kind of
Yep.
whether it be
Yeah.
a disability or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. We have to be cognizant of that, just as a practice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just because
That's
just because somebody
definitely,
looks happy doesn't mean that they don't have an issue, something going on.
yeah, I still struggle with like you said, the bar scene, right? It's all that background noise does not help at all. And I actually
No.
have somebody from one of the organizations that we one of the vendors that we work with, right? Um, Never met her before. With somebody's boss, right? And then apparently she came up to try to get my attention, got mad and walked away. And then Hal saw all this go on, and he walked up and talked to her and said, "Hey, you realize he's deaf?" And then she started to understand why I was ignoring her. And so, for anyone out there, if I've ever ignored you in that way, I apologize. Right? I might not have heard you, especially if we were in the bar.
Yeah.
You know, it's like really difficult, and that's why I don't always chat as much unless it's with people I really know, because even then, with them, it's hard to hear. I mean, you go out for some beers and stuff and have some good time, but I don't. I do it for a little bit and then I'm done. I can't do any more.
Yeah. Crazy. So I was just
I'm
thinking about,
laughing because all of this, it hits me as well. Big crowds, background noise, trying to hear,
Mhm.
or yeah, like you said, high ranges. Somebody's voice. If it's a higher end voice, I have a hard time hearing that person. That type of thing. So yeah.
yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like there's just little things that, we all have our little battles to overcome. And it's actually in my kind of other world, I guess, that outside of IT, I have a podcast called Better Than You Found It. And I had a guest on that she talked about just some really horrific things she had to overcome. I mean, just being like abused by a cult and things like that, just like really, just horrible, horrible things. And one of the things she said was that, even though there's all these things that she's gone through, on a pain scale, a 10 for her is going to be different than a 10 for someone else. But that doesn't diminish the other person's 10. Your 10 is still your 10. And that's significant. And we tend to play this weird comparison game, thinking that, one person's, abnormality or disability or just, emotional trauma, whatever it is somehow bigger than someone else's. Or there's also the converse of people that are very much like, my pain is worse than your pain. I don't want to hear your pain, that sort of thing. And so there's two ways of this street, but the reality is, you know what, we all have little things, and if we can acknowledge that and be good people to each other, everybody wins.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. We've lost. All right. Nope. Not going to say it. Yeah. Almost went down the road, DJ. Almost. I caught myself.
I was grabbing the mouse. Kick you out. If you dare.
No, but
share something before we kind of get ready to sign off here. I want to share my first memory of Joe, of our first actual conversation, and it's why I was thinking of energy drink. I wanted to reveal this big mystery of why I suddenly randomly was talking about energy drinks. So, the first time you and I actually interacted face to face was at E2EVC in, I think, New York.
Yes.
And so that's the first time we actually had an actual conversation face to face, and it was just fascinating because I just have this memory of having like a Monster energy drink, and you were like, "Hey, get those around the corner for like $3." Not a paid product placement. However,
Zero sugar. I used to do the sugar one for years until I started having some real consequences from that. Well, I thought I was actually having a heart attack, but it ended up just being really bad heartburn. So I had to switch to the sugar-free stuff. I actually quit for a couple of years, and then I switched to the sugar-free stuff.
We couldn't be geeks if we didn't have some sort of vice, right?
I'm getting better. At it. I'm down to like just one a day right now. And that's my goal, is one a day, and then it's going to be a half a day. I'm trying to slowly wean off of it, but they are very highly addictive. Like you said, everybody has their vice. Hal, he smoke all the time, and we have constantly had to get up and go take a smoke break. Hey, but here's the thing. I learned something about that because I'm not a smoker, so I don't know what it's like. I found out that there's an entire underground world in the smoking section where everybody kind of on a level playing field. And you find out that a lot of the upper management folks or even C levels go smoke, and they go to the same section. And you have all kinds of interesting conversations at the smoking section. And the only reason I went was because, Hal, he had to go take a smoke break. I'm like, okay, I'll go with you, and we'll chat for a bit and go to the smoking section. But then you realize all these other decision makers are in the smoking section. And when you're there, it seems like there's no punches pulled, in the sense of you lay out what your problems are and they figure out how to solve it, and you cut through all the middle layers in between. And sometimes that back door networking goes a long way. Then you talk about networking, right? It's just networking with your peers, but networking within the organization or other organizations. But now that was, I think it's stupid. It sounds stupid, but that smoking section is a gold mine in the respect of networking, especially other people. Now this upper management knows who you are. And even to talk about your kids and the dogs and the cats and whatnot. But now, if you're in that organization, now you have some people in upper management who recognize your name and know who you are, and you've networked with them at some level. That helps when it comes to promotion time too, when they start wanting to move people up the chain as opportunities in the organization change for one reason or another. But I thought that was super fascinating.
Love that.
It's funny because I don't know if you guys watched Friends, but the episode with Rachel and the smoking and her boss and coworker and all these decisions being made
Hmm.
while they were out smoking, and they'd come back and she was behind. Yeah, it is true, and it's scary true almost. But yeah, you're right.
Did you guys watch the IT Crowd? That
Oh
show on BBC years
yes,
ago.
I love that show.
There's an episode where Jen starts smoking, and
And it's the
then
Russian gulag and stuff, and
yeah, the Milwaukee Park thing, and it was just utterly brilliant. But I agree. There was a time in my early career in the early 2000s where I discovered that same thing, Joe. That I would go out and just hang out with people, and you found that just like there was this equalization. Like there was no, I'm talking to like the president of the company, CEO of the company, just because they've been told to go smoke outside, and I'm willing to go. For me, it was like at first it was like, oh, I can just go take a break, and then, eventually I did pick up. I used to smoke cloves cigarettes back in college, and kind of picked that up again for a while there, but then it got really cold, and I didn't like that anymore. But
Oh yeah, we were on a project in Utah in dead of winter, and the guy insisted on his smoke breaks, and of course we can't be in the building without him, right? We had to be escorted
yes, that's happened to me as well.
everywhere, and so when he went to go smoke, we had to go out into a little smoking area that's in the parking lot that's kind of a glass and enclosement like a bus stop, right? Like an enclosed bus stop. But yeah, we're out there. There's like 4 inches of snow on the ground, and he likes to take long smoke breaks because that's when he's smoking. That's when he gets all his great ideas he wants to run by you, and he wants to discuss with us. And so we'd be out there for like an hour and a half for the smoke break. So it was more like 3 or 4 smoke breaks in there, but we'd be out in the freezing cold and 4 inches of snow discussing this project and all the ideas he had.
And it's funny, in 2010, I think it was, that I was in a job that wasn't really going quite well, and finding that I didn't actually ever tell anyone that I was a smoker, because I really wasn't, but I would go out with somebody else that was, just to get away from the cubicle, and get my mind clear. And so I'm not saying you should go hang out with smokers necessarily, but there's also some wisdom to just saying, what, you know I can take 15 minutes out of my day and just get away for a little bit, and then come back. Your
I had to
brain
learn the hard way too. Yeah,
yeah.
and it took a toll on your health after a while because, we would go in and we'd be working, 4 hours solid, no break at all. Go get on the lunch train, go do lunch, come back and work straight through to 5. And once it's 5 o'clock, we're done, wrapped up, no breaks. And, you can't do that anymore. At least I
And
can't do that anymore. I still,
yeah,
go a couple hours at a time, but it's like, okay, I need 15 minutes, step back, go get some water, go take a bio break, that kind of stuff.
yeah. And I'm worse about that here at home. I am, and being, self-employed and all that kind of stuff, it's that I am the most, I work for a tyrant, is what that is. He never lets me take breaks. He's always just, keeping me at my desk all day long. If I don't force the issue, then yeah,
Drink a couple of these, right? Do it
can't help it.
quite often, actually.
You should go on strike, DJ. Just
I mean, I
and
kind
go
of,
out
actually, I'll tell you guys right now. Yesterday I did. I absolutely did. I was actually trying to get some stuff done, and I was very frustrated about it. And I'm like, I don't have to take this. So my wife and I, played Destiny 2 for about 3 hours. I went on strike yesterday. I totally did that.
But I think it is a hard lesson to learn that you can take 15 minutes, even if you're billable. It's
True.
You just don't realize how much of a recharge that can be, and
Mhm.
how much clearer your thinking,
Yeah, absolutely.
starts up again, because you're just not mashed into trying, whether it's an issue or you're just implementing something. It recharges you. It does.
You gotta step away, let your subconscious take over for a little bit, and then you get an epiphany while you're in the smoking section with somebody. And it's like,
Exactly.
oh, wait, we didn't try
It's
this.
such a weird place, but I like it. Joe, I want to ask you about the boxes in the background. Apparently, you really dislike geeky things.
No,
So,
it was horrible. I'm actually wearing a Deadpool t-shirt too.
nice.
Yeah, I
Just
do
got a
collect
little
comics.
Deadpool over there too. Yeah, yeah.
There's some comics over here, some collectibles. I do collect a lot of comics. These boxes back here are empty. They actually got moved to more sturdier plastic bins and whatnot. So yeah, I do dabble in the comics a bit, right? More some of the higher value ones, and Batman, Spider-Man, Venom, Guardians of the Galaxy, those kind of things. Deadpool, obviously, I got a Deadpool t-shirt on, you know. And you got your Deadpool. You had a Deadpool bear in the back.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite artists is Scotty Young, and so I've got a bunch of statues, Scotty Young based statues.
Yeah.
They actually took his artwork and made a 3D model of it, and then made a statue out of it. I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite ones. This one kind of got me started with the whole statue part of it, with the Rocket and Groot.
Nice.
Yeah, they've started doing that with some of Alex Ross's art. DC, some of the Batman and whatnot. It just looks so cool.
Yeah. The Venom. But the other stuff on the wall is Steve invited me to a William Shatner show many years ago.
Oh,
Well,
cool.
a meet and greet. So I have the ticket there, and then there's a poster that Shatner signed. This was a poster I really liked from a group of guys that have a comic, and you can see the little guy's head right there, called Happiness and Cyanide. Kind of a little bit of a twisted daily comic type comic strip type thing. And then on top here, a lot of the some of them are the pictures that we've taken over the years with Shatner and Grumpy Cat, Stan Lee, MacGyver. This was a rock race we did. It was like obstacle course race with my godson and Hal, his wife, Bobby Jones. And then the Mythbusters stuff. There's some Mythbusters stuff in the background here. The Mythbusters tour. That kind of fun stuff. I got more to put on there. I'm redoing the room next to this one. It's going to have more of the geekiness in there. And some of this geekiness is going to go over there. But
see, I've got this Red Wing wall behind me, but if you could see around the room, it's gaming stuff. Like I was big into Warcraft for 15 years, up until actually January.
I had doing that, yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't. It became a job, and it wasn't fun. It was like, why do I need to log in every day to get this stupid stuff done? But I still love the lore and all that stuff. It's great.
I'm laughing because I have exactly the aforementioned 3 hours experience in Destiny 2. My wife, however, is like hardcore into that grinding, like gotta get the upgrades and all this kind of stuff. And it's hilarious.
It was fun, but like you were doing like 3 hours of the stuff every day, and it's like, okay, that's a chore at that point. And yeah, if I'm not rating, it's just it's kind of loses its excitement or whatever. But yeah, no, but yeah, Diablo, all that good stuff. I've got all sorts of stuff. But
have you seen my mouse pad? Yeah.
Those three, yeah.
I got the
Diablo when that came out.
Yeah, that's especially
one of my favorite games early on, and it took forever for them to release Diablo 3.
And forever 4, but yeah, we'll get there.
The hack and slash RPG,
yeah,
as they call it, right? Dungeon Tale? The Microsoft one had one.
Look at that. Very cool.
And the good doctor that would, he also did the voice of Crow. So they were in Grand Rapids, and I got them to sign it and stuff. And
Very cool.
we used to watch Space Ghost, Coast to Coast, and then MST3K. I mean, it was just like that was our Saturday, and then Friday night was
thing,
the MTV and the Headbangers Ball, stuff like that.
I obviously didn't ever watch Headbangers Ball. That's just obviously not my thing.
No, not at all.
Maybe once I've watched it, but that's it.
That's very cool. Well, I'll tell you what, guys. We obviously need to change format. We need to be a 90-minute show. It's just like, why do we fight it? That sort of thing.
I'm telling I could go back. I just want to go back and start talking about like the old BBSs and
Oh yeah,
all that.
story there.
All these memories.
But I think it's time to close this out. So Joe, I want to give you a chance to give any final thoughts or any anecdotes or anything like that you want to close this with.
Well, thank you for guys for having me today. I do appreciate the opportunity to come and just just do the brain dump, basically, right? Just share some things and not have to go super detailed, technical. It is fun to do, to just talk, right? And talk about experiences and share your experience and even listen to other people's experiences too. I really enjoyed some of the anecdotes that you and Jeff also provided today too. And so I get a lot of value out of that. And it's just fun hanging out. It's just like a smaller version of the EUC happy hour that we've been doing for last 4 or 5 months now. Except it's just an opportunity to focus a little bit more in to just a few people versus 16 or 20 people sometimes, and everybody kind of stomping on each other because you're trying to wait for that moment to talk, but then somebody else starts talking, you're like, oh crap, and you kind of get the old Ethernet days of before they had switches, and you get that over that 60% capacity and all crashes, right? The collision, you get too many collisions on your hub. Jeff knows. You guys know what this means, right? And where else can I go and talk about these kind of things and people understand it, right? You bring up a millennial, they what's a collision domain, right?
Yeah.
There's never been people that don't know what a collision domain is. They know what a VLAN is, but they don't know why they have a VLAN. What a VLAN, the purpose of a VLAN is in a collision domain. They don't understand some of these technologies. There was one guy who didn't understand what a command line was. He knew Windows, but he didn't know what the CLI was, a command prompt was. He couldn't do anything in there to save his life. But I thank you for the opportunity for being able to chat today.
Yeah, well, thank you for being on. It's been great. It's like I said, you brought back a lot of things that I hadn't thought about in years. The modem. If you remember, if for those that remember call waiting on the phones.
Oh, that's bad.
Somebody you had to. So you put in the little switch, and I don't remember what that switch was at the command line. ATT or whatever it was. And you had this whole command line at the end. You'd put in the switch to save call waiting.
The AT++. Session or something like that. We actually went in and actually gave the modem commands.
Yeah.
ATH was it? ATH0 was what was ATH0? Was that the hang up? An ATH++? I couldn't
tell you anymore. That knowledge is gone. But those were good times, man. When you had to really.
Back in the day, you had to learn interrupts, like interrupt 1, 2, and 3, and 1 and 3 are shared, and 2 and 4 are shared. Nobody talked about that today. They still exist, but it's so buried deep in these operating systems now that not even the developers of the OS probably deal with any of that kind of stuff today.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, Joe, we'll let you go and get ready for your next kind of in the same boat, but I'll kick you back into our green room and be back with you in a moment.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for being on with us. Appreciate it. Jeff, final thoughts on the modem?
Yeah, I think we hit on, again, such a big topic of, you don't know what someone's going through just by looking at them necessarily. And, so I think it just behooves all of us to be kind, um, to anybody and everybody. And especially in this climate, we need to be human beings
Yeah,
and just
absolutely.
be kind. We're all in it together. That's
Yeah,
all I got.
people in IT. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Thanks, man. All right. Well, one thing before we go, we do have a special bundle still going on. I've almost got a new page up for this. We'll get there eventually, explaining more about the book and nothing like that. But honestly, it's been a pleasure to be able to offer this, and we've still got plenty left. So if you would like to take advantage of a bundle of, two of my books and one of my favorite books, I think we've got about 40 or 50 left for the full bundle. So if you want to take advantage of that, we have a new link for this. This is thrive-it.com/TC bundle. So this is specific to ThriveCast listeners. So it'll be actually something that in a couple of weeks we're going to be, we might have to raise the price a little bit. So get in now, well, before we have to do that. So, we can thank a certain large uh, company that ships a lot of things across the world for increasing our costs a little bit, but we won't name names because we love them. So anyway, thanks for being with us today on ThriveCast. Make sure you like that the thumbs up thing that you see down below there. Make sure you subscribe so you can get a notification of future episodes, and we will see you next week with Kyle Davies. And it's gonna be a lot of fun. So cheers, everybody. Thanks for being with us.